Okay, so no questions. Then I will begin today talking really and trying to study carefully crime and punishment. Our next example of a world really literature text, which is, I think, a very stark, great example of world literature. Now, maybe you know the idea or the main theme we have talked about here in this novel, or the main theme, I should say, really is about really the question of existentialism, or you know, the idea, the general idea of, could be again to do with maybe isolation to some extent, or the question of psychology, and so on. So the idea really here is to see the connection, if you like, strongly, I think, the connection between literature and existentialism as a philosophy, and maybe more, because we have seen that, if you like, to some extent, in Dante's example and Ovid's example, and really more here in Dostoevsky. Now, when I say here really existentialism, of course, the idea or the stress or the main theme, of course, is to see and to discuss all those really ideas related to man in general, and how really society works in so many ways in relation to our own existence, our own life, how we react and how we maybe even feel being maybe punished or not punished, or maybe rewarded or not rewarded, and so on. So we found the example, the big example, when Dante's the whole question of the universe, you know, because as maybe we have seen in the distant or the wider question, which is, you know, asking about the universe, you know, to talk about how the world is divided into three main areas, as Dante said, Inferno, Paradiso, and, you know, Purgatorio, and so on. Again, the connection, of course, which we have, I think, explored to some extent, to see how this was heavily questioned by Al-Ma'arri and by many people about him. And we even in Arabic literature, in Arabic culture also, we talk about this as really part of philosophy. Yes, absolutely, philosophy. So there's no way, absolutely no way we can, you know, separate the two, philosophy from life, you know. and society, because the question here of to see how literature is connected to all of these, of course, because the whole thing is there, because you can't really separate. You can't talk about philosophy without man. You can't talk about existence without man. You can't talk about life about man, or literature. The whole thing of literature is about man, of course. So the whole question here is really a big question about even the whole idea of philosophy. Why people even talked about philosophy, or what is philosophy? Really, people say this. What is philosophy? And really, this question of philosophy, is to see how we live. Actually, to accept the way we live. Even the whole idea of religions, and the question of God, and the question of all these heavy questions, is to accept the way we are, and to really to sort of understand how we come to this world, and how we go, and where we go, and so on. So really, this is a big question we have seen in Dante's example, and it was in a funny way, it was in a strange way done by Ovid's example, which is the metamorphosis, about the whole idea of change. And I mean, this is a drastic example of sometimes when you can't accept reality, or when you can't accept yourself, or you can't accept your existence. You want to change all of this, and you can't do it. Sometimes you go crazy about it, and so on. Really, the whole idea is to some extent, is always, the question is always hovering over us, whether we like it or not. We are always surrounded with this big question of our life, our existence, whether we are okay or not, whether we accept death or not, whether we accept what we are or not, whether we are ill or not, whether we are happy or not, whether we are sad or not, and so on and so forth. The whole idea is something which will live with us all the time, really all the time. There's no way. And it's really good that sometimes when you are a real believer, you say, yeah, well, this is it, and I think this is absolutely a lovely thing about being a believer. You start to accept these things as facts, and you say, okay, fine. I'm here for a while, and I'm going to die. Okay, fine. So really, this is the idea here. So the connection I'm trying to say here, that this big theme of existentialism, really, it's nothing to do with being, sometimes people say they think, existentialism, or to think about, such modern philosophical questions. People think that this is something to do with being a non-believer, or being, you don't believe in, for example, something like heavy questions like that. Really, it's not. That's not the subject of philosophy, really. That's not at all the idea behind philosophy and existentialism. So really, the novel here, I'm saying, it talks about all of this, because here the novel Crime and Punishment is about a man who killed a woman and her sister thinking that he was doing a good job for society, and thinking that he was doing something good to help society. I mean, this is really, again, a crazy thing to say. But yeah, I mean, this is really the main idea we really find, which is impossible to accept. To say, yeah, we kill for the help of society, you know. And I think this is a terrible thing to say, or even to believe that this is possible, or this is acceptable in any sense. Crime and punishment is about crime and about punishment. Really, it's about both. That a crime is a crime, and you could never make a perfect crime. You will never make a perfect crime, and you will always be found out. You will always be found out. You will be caught one day. You know, sooner or later you will be. And really, this novel here is about this question of the impossibility, absolute impossibility of really doing or committing a perfect crime. And the novel is about punishment. Yes, punishment, physical and spiritual. Yeah, somebody wants in. Yeah. Are you listening, boys and girls?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. If you. Yeah. Okay. Good. I will leave. I will leave the idea later on for further discussions. Of course, you are always welcome to chip in and to participate in what I'm saying here. Really quickly, I'm saying that this novel is about punishment as well as crime, punishment, physical and spiritual and moral, and if you like, really psychological. This novel is about this whole idea of really, it's more really on psychological punishment and the terrible question of psychology, that people think that is something easy or something we can understand or something we can overcome or we can forget or we really don't care about it. No, really, no. Really, the question of psychology and the question of psychoanalysis is something absolutely essential to appreciate and to understand and to make people think that this is something really heavy and important for people to understand. The novel really is mostly about psychoanalysis. Absolutely, is even more powerful, and I think more powerful and superior to any of what Freud really was talking about in his psychoanalysis or about his studies of Freudian psychology. As we know, in modern time or modern psychology, people think that, and scientists and people say, or psychologists believe, that really psychology was founded by Sigmund Freud, the Austrian German scientist or doctor, Sigmund Freud. But really, no, really, Freud was in fact, he did not invent anything by himself, really, to be honest. He did not. He just wrote about it in a good way. Yes, he wrote good stuff about it. Yes, he explained about it in a funny way. Yes, in a crazy way. Yes, I think that's true, especially when he went too far in explaining everything in terms of sexuality, which is to some extent could be crazy to talk about or to believe and to argue in this way, to say that everything we do is sexual. Well, Freud really did that, said that in a way about the whole thing, but really that's not completely true. And Freud was not the inventor. Freud was not the inventor of psychoanalysis, was not. There were many people before him, even believe it or not, we had many Arab scholars really who even well before Western society did that. But of course, as we always think, sometimes we as Arab scholars and Arab professors and teachers and maybe researchers and so on, sorry, sometimes we don't focus on this from, I don't know, ignorance or something, or sometimes we say zammarul hayy la yutrib, zammarul hayy la yutrib, which is really a crazy thing to say. Do you know this saying, Shaima?
No.
Afnan Maitha? No? You don't know what zammarul hayy la yutrib. You don't know the expression?
No, I don't.
Doctor, we say مغني الحي لا يطرب.
Who said that? Zainab?
Yes.
And you say this in Algeria, not in Oman. Yeah. In Oman, what do you say about this Omani people? Almaha, Saida, what do you say?
What
This
does
is
that
the
mean?
first time I have heard this.
Me too.
The first time you heard this,
What does it mean?
Yes.
we say Zammar, Zammar, the piper, the musicians. As we say, Zammarul hayy la yutrib, means if a person from your own area, if he is a great man, you don't think he's great because he's from your area, because well, he's from our area, so we know him, so he's not good enough. But if it's somebody else from outside, you say, wow, he's a great singer. Wow, he's a great piper. So, yeah, funny, isn't it? Absolutely. We really play this game, we Arab scholars, mostly. And I think not just Arabs, I think many other cultures, they do the same. Because they don't believe and trust their own people. Thinking that, we know them, as if they are not really good enough. But when you look at somebody from outside, they say, oh, wow, but you don't know them. So because you don't know them, you say, yeah. Yeah, so I think this is true. There are many Arab philosophers who really initiated psychoanalysis, far better than Freud, far better than Freud, And I really don't have time to give you evidence here or to talk about, but please, if you want, you can check that. But this is really true. So one of them here, I want to say to you today, this morning, this time really is our friend Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky was a Russian writer, really, and he lived well before Freud, and even before. I'm not saying just Dostoevsky. not just Dostoevsky in Russia, of course, there were other people before him even. And, you know, this morning I was talking about, today I was actually in the morning, in my introduction to Literature 1 to my young students, I was giving them Edgar Allan Poe, and I gave them a short story. And I think you know it, maybe I taught you that, some of you who were with me in that course, The Telltale Heart, for example, or in American Survey, those of you who, you know, again, another short story, or many short stories by Edgar Allan Poe, really, and I said, really, his psychoanalysis is more powerful, I think, is far more powerful than what Freud was saying, or what later on Carl Jung, or you know, other people who came after that. So Crime and Punishment is an absolute lovely document of psychoanalysis, of showing you how our mind operates, how crazy sometimes we are, how we are schizophrenic, how we are paranoid, how we are claustrophobic, how we are always, if you like, paranoid in so many ways, and we are controlled by paranoia or by phobia or by so many crazy things of our own making, you know, to some extent of our own making. And I think this is, you know, what the whole novel is about here. That the novel here is about the effect and the power of psychoanalysis to say how much the punishment is psychological and how the punishment is effective, and how the psychological punishment is more powerful, absolutely far more powerful than the physical. Crime and Punishment is about that, is how heavily, how effective Raskolnikov in the novel killed 2 ladies, and he was okay about it. But later on, you know, his mind, originally, he was always thinking about it, but later on, all the time, you know, physically and in front of society, he, nobody could tell, or nobody, well, later on, they started to suspect that it was him because his behavior showed that it was him who killed the ladies, you know, Alyona Ivanovna and her sister. But you see, I'm saying here that later on, his behavior and his acts and everything, he was challenging the police and he was challenging everybody. And he said that he committed a perfect crime, blah, 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 blah. But really, what terribly explored, what terribly exposed, what terribly made him a criminal or showed him a real criminal is his mind and his psychology, and the punishment that he receives, first and foremost, through his own, you know, absolute paranoia all the time. He was completely always, you know, hypochondriac, or this question of hypochondria, again, extremely over and over sensitive. It's like exactly like the narrator in The Telltale Heart, or like in The Black Cat by Edgar Allan Poe, or like the man in the cask of Amontillado, or like again the hero in The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, and you know, I can give you so many examples, but I just, you know, mentioned some of those for you in a real maybe literature context. Really, the novel is about this heavy, absolute heavy, strong question of psychology and our psyche, and because of that, Raskolnikov, at the end of the day, well, not didn't wait much because he couldn't bear it any longer. He couldn't tolerate it any longer. With the help of poor Sonia, the lovely young lady Sonia, who was supposed to be again another young, absolutely innocent, young, decent young girl, a lady who was forced psychologically, even punished for something she didn't do. Her punishment was physical and spiritual and moral, because she had to sell her body for other in the streets to keep and to protect and to keep her family and, you know, to keep her own brothers and sisters. And the tragedy is her own not even brothers and sisters, step brothers and sisters and stepmother, but to keep her terrible, ugly father who was a drunkard, and so on. So with the help of this poor Sonia, who fell in love with him and he fell in love with her completely, and he admitted his crime to her, and she forced him, or not forced him, really. She convinced him, saying, hey, you should go to the police and say, I did it, and then get rid of this terrible disease that you have in your mind. And then you will be punished physically, and then you will be fine at the end of the day. We shall see whether we accept him or not, or the punishment was good enough or not, and we can argue this and we can discuss this later together a lot, if you like. Are you following, boys and girls?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, what do you think? You have not yet, have you? Anybody started reading the novel?
Yes.
Very good. Of course, you can see the novel is written originally in Russian. I have not read it in Russian. I don't know Russian. I have no idea how it looks like in Russian, but I love it. I loved it because the translation I have, or the translation we have here, we think, I mean, I don't know, I think it's a great translation, but I can't really judge it because I don't know Russian. But the text, the way we read it in English is superb. I think the translation here is a great job here. And I think here, to go back to the idea of translation and to go back to our question in the exam about translation. And by the way, the exam, I have not yet touched your exam. Didn't have time. I'm marking other papers. I have not finished it, but hopefully, inshallah, next week I will finish it. And I will give it back to you as soon as I finish it. Yeah, to see here the effect, the absolute power of translation here. I think here the translator, Constance, her name, I think something like that. I think her, let me see here, I have the name. Yeah, Constance Garnett. Yeah, Constance is a great job, I think. I don't know. Is this? I must check. Really, I feel. Yeah.
Doctor, I bought it in Arabic and the translation was terrible. I couldn't even read it, and now I am looking for other translation in Arabic.
Zainab.
Yes, doctor.
Wallahi, I swear, although I have not, but I can venture and say to you that you will never find a good Arabic translation.
Really? Why?
Because we don't do, hardly these translators do a good job, because they do it only for money and for commercial reasons, which is a shame. Which is a shame. I have never read any Shakespeare or any other literature stuff in Arabic, and it was a good it was horrible. Yeah, it's a shame. It is a shame. So don't bother Read it in Russian or in English.
I will try to learn Russian, inshallah.
No, read it in English. I think that's enough. I love the book because I read it in English many times, and I every single time, wallahi, every time I read it, I say, oh, wow, what a lovely book, what a lovely novel, really. So that's why I told you, because some of you sent me an email saying, Doctor, how many pages are we going to read? Come on, Doctor, you are good and nice enough not to give us all this. Come on, Doctor. I said, yes, I'm sorry. You have to read at least 160 pages. 160 pages. The first 3 parts. I'm sorry, but I can assure you, you will love it. I know maybe now you will give me faces. You will give me faces. Yeah, well, yeah, you think so. Wallahi غلطان يا دكتور. Huh? Shaima, Sarah, are you saying this?
I don't say this.
No, doctor, not really.
I think if we will have enough time, I will be very like I am interested to read it all.
Yeah, you should. Absolutely, you should. It should be read word for word by word. I'm going to read it with you, to read as much as I can with you here, to really give you the feeling of this, to tell you how to read the novel. It's a lovely, amazing novel. It's about, you know, I'm saying here the power of the narration, the great style, and the way we see Raskolnikov, you know, is telling us his story is amazing. And also, I will draw your attention to this. I will show you the story. Also, I gave you. In fact, I posted on Moodle I don't know. Did I? I think I did. Not. I think not. Maybe I could not at that time. The film, it was made into a huge, lovely film, and I will show you today one example of that. Today I will. Oh, what a shame! Oh, what a shame! Now they say to me this video is private. Video unavailable. You see, I tried to download it, but
Doctor, do you know any of the actors?
yeah, I will look for it. I will find it. Just a minute. Let me. I will find it. I know, of course, I know the main actor is John Hurt, the man who did the film 1984 by George Orwell. The man who did the film 1984. He's called John Hurt. I will, because I used to save it here on my screen. Yeah, where is it? Let me check something, because you know I relied on this idea because I thought I will. Yeah. Just a second, okay? John Hurt. John Hurt and oh my God, where is he? Just a second. I'm sure it should be here. Let me see. John Hurt and
Doctor, I put a link from YouTube. I think this is the film that you mean.
really?
I am not sure.
Let me just try this one for a second, and I'll come back to you. Yeah, I had it. 3 episodes, and I have been watching it for 3 years, and I showed it to my students in the last 3 years. Really here, and now it's gone. They say it's no more. It's no more. It's a private thing. Anyway, I will try and I'll try and find it for you if I can. What a shame.
Doctor, there is a video in the YouTube, but the actor is John Sim, not John Hurt.
No. The one I'll try to find it and see if I can. Oh, what's a shame. I couldn't. Once I tried to download it, but I could not. So I kept it here as on my screen, and I used to play it anytime I wanted. Anyway, I will try to see if I can find the film for you. But yeah, it's a great, absolutely great film, and it shows really his the acting is superb. I mean, Raskolnikov himself. So the novel, as I said, please, I want you to read that. The story is about, as I say, committing this crime. Raskolnikov, a young man, a student, a poor student, a law student, studying at, he left home. He comes from a rural, maybe countryside, and he came to St. Petersburg to study. And he was a university student, a law student, and then, of course, because he's poor and he couldn't find support and so on, so he started to become really isolated and lonely and so on. And he was having all these superb ideas about society and about existence. And he was an example, as I said, of an existentialist who really felt that he was a Superman, And I think, again, really, Dostoevsky is, asking us or talking about this idea of the Superman and how people sometimes really sometimes people act and behave in this way, and because of this stupid belief and crazy belief that he should maybe do something to correct society, and he said, or he believed, that he could kill this old woman. Well, originally because he thought that he could take her money and give to society, because he thought that she is a terrible pawnbroker, as if to say she was using and abusing people, because she's a rich, absolutely old, rich, useless, terrible old woman doing nothing except abusing people. But if you don't need her, why do you come to her? She's a pawn broker. Yes, but why do you come and pawn things on her or with her? And use, or if you like, employ whatever means that she's employing with you or with anybody. So that's why he decided to kill her, thinking that he could get her money, maybe to some extent that he could use her money himself, or although we know later on that he really didn't take any of her money, and he killed her as if it was absolutely useless killing, with no real sort of selfish or money reason, really. At the end of the day, we find out that the whole killing was meaningless, was empty, in the sense that he didn't take any money. So why would you kill her then? So at the end of the day, it did. The whole thing, it changed, the matter of killing and savagely killing by hatching her with a hatch, a massive act, killing in a terrible, absolute, vicious and savage way to hatch somebody to death. I mean, this is unbelievable. Although, my God, I feel terrible when you think about it. Although there are still people hatching each other these days, we have so many hatchers around in many societies, really. Sorry, somebody asking, is the sharing what somebody asking? Oh, maybe I'm not sharing. Yeah, sorry. Maybe I wanted to share and then yeah, of course. Well, I'm not sharing anything. I'm just still talking about the novel, really. Okay, so you can see here in my introduction, I give you a sort of tiny introduction, very small, really, introduction about Dostoevsky himself and his achievements as a real novelist. You can see here, I mentioned a little bit in this that Dostoevsky wrote really great books. To some extent, I will mention this. To some extent, a lot of what Dostoevsky was writing, or a lot of what he really wrote, maybe there was some connections to his own real life in many ways. Really, in many ways, Dostoevsky suffered a lot of psychological problems himself, mainly the question of epilepsy. To some extent, he was epileptic in a way, which is the question here is to some extent close to what we call maybe, this epilepsy. It's like a schizophrenia, or like, I think this is the idea of epilepsy. And he was in many ways, in real life, I'm talking here about Dostoevsky himself, because funny, I think this is true, not funny even, it's really sad, because I told my students in the Introduction to Literature 1 this morning and last week, I was saying to them that there was a lot of reality between what Edgar Allan Poe was writing and himself in real life. Himself in real life suffered a lot from these terrible psychological, extreme, extra maybe sensitivity and crazy things, or crazy streaks, if you like, about him. And I think we can say the same here about Dostoevsky himself. Dostoevsky himself had a problem in psychology, psychological problem, or something like Raskolnikov's problem, which is the Superman problem, or the epilepsy, or even the question of gambling and the question of drink. The three main heavy questions in the novel, which is drink and gambling and drink and crime. Really, these are the big questions here in this novel. Dostoevsky, to some extent, had really suffered a lot from the whole idea of addiction. He was addicted to some extent. He was addicted to some extent to gambling and to drink to some extent. And in fact, he in my little introduction here, he went to prison, for his own really amazing, of course, ideas. I think I mentioned here, if you like, notice I say in this little paragraph here, in 1847, Dostoevsky became active in socialist circles, largely because of his opposition to the institution of serfdom. So here again, we talk about Dostoevsky as being a socialist even before socialism started. We know that the whole question of socialism and communism in Russian society was well before 1917, because we know the Russian Revolution started in 1917 by Lenin, and the founding of what we call later on as communism, and all this socialism and all that. It was against, or reaction against, the terrible political system of social system, not just political, which is really serfdom. And here notice, serfdom is like slavery, really ubudiyya, absolute ubudiyya, really. So he was in a way was an active socialist before socialism, or even before what, because Marx and Engels actually in Germany, and this is again another great thing we can say about Dostoevsky. Really, even before Marx and Engels in Germany and in London, they were writing about Marxism and socialism. Before them, Dostoevsky was among some others in Russia. They were doing the same, similarly the same, arguing against the terrible treatment, or the terrible poverty or mistreatment or ill treatment or maltreatment of workers and farmers and peasants. Because here the word serfdom, really, serfdom is to do with the way, like in the system of slavery in America, well before in America, the way these slaves were treated in plantations. So because of this, as you can see here, I'm saying he was arrested and imprisoned. Notice, on April 23, 1849, he was arrested for his participation in a group that illegally printed and disturbed socialist propaganda. After spending 8 months in prison, he was sentenced to death for membership in the group. You see? Well, I took this from so many sources, but this is briefly the ideas. So you can see his own, if you like, revolutionary spirit here. In a way, Dostoevsky was saying that Raskolnikov was a socialist, a radical socialist who wants to change society in his own fashion. And the way, of course, his fashion was wrong. To kill people was wrong, was a stupid idea. Even in later other novels, we see the examples that he did in the same way. of course, especially in the other great novels, as we shall see here, like The Gambler and like The Idiot, or like, I think, again, the last one, which is the brothers Karamazov. I think, again, this Karamazov, you know, a great novel. The brothers Karamazov, or again, The Idiot, Al-Ablah. It's again, all of them were translated to Arabic, but again, unfortunately, terrible translations. But anyway, they give the idea. So we can see here the question of I'm seeing here the connection, the real connection. I'm trying to see how Dostoevsky really gave us a lot of his own life, a lot of his own, if you like, reality into his fiction. Yeah, of course. You know, writers always borrow from their own experience. That's true. You know, that's reality, because you don't write from nowhere. You don't write from nowhere. You write from your own real experience. Could be reality, yes. But I mean, there was no real Raskolnikov. Yeah, of course. But there were many other Raskolnikovs in the world. We know that there are many Hamlets in the world, like many, you know, figures who look like Raskolnikov, who are like Raskolnikov, or even worse than Raskolnikov. You know, so this is the idea I'm saying here about that. He was sentenced to death for membership in the group and with other members of the group to be shot. But the execution turned out to be a mere show, meant to punish the prisoners psychologically. You see? So here, you see here the employment of psychological punishment was actually exercised against him in reality, to know what the punishment psychologically means. Really, he wanted to tell us here, you know, because he himself in real life was psychologically punished, or if you like, you know, treated to some extent. Dostoevsky then spent 4 years at a labor camp in Siberia, followed by 4 years of military service. You know, you can see here Raskolnikov's imprisonment in Siberia, and all this story that he told us in Siberia was, of course, a reflection from really Raskolnikov, not exactly Raskolnikov, but I'm saying here really Dostoevsky's own real mind reflections about his own experience in Siberia. Raskolnikov's time in a Siberian prison, described in the epilogue of Crime and Punishment, is based on Dostoevsky's own experiences at a similar prison. And, you know, I give another really here idea. Notice, Dostoevsky, again, suffered the first of many epileptic seizures. You know, this is what I'm saying about the question of epilepsy. He also underwent something of a political conversion. Again, the way he changed from being a socialist into maybe another, if you like, you know, maybe more radical, if you like. Notice, rejecting the radical socialist positions that had led to his arrest in favor of a conservative concern for traditional values, his dismissal of leftist political thought is evident in Crime and Punishment. For instance, Raskolnikov's crime is motivated in part by his theories about society. You see, so this is the idea about his Superman theory about society. Many of the reasons that I said he did this, he killed Alyona Ivanovna and her sister, poor sister, really, Lizaveta, is just because of his crazy, stupid ideas about society, being Superman. And that's why you say radical leftist, you know, very far away leftist ideas. So that's what I'm saying here. He gives us more, even more horrible examples of that. For example, here, Lebeziatnikov, whose name is derived from the Russian word of fawning, is obsessed with the so-called new philosophies that raged through St. Petersburg during the time that Dostoevsky was writing the novel. Luzhin, a mid-level government official, is continually afraid of being exposed by nihilists. Again, this is really another great idea. Those people, because here we go back to the question of existentialism, because here it's related to nihilism. Nihilism. And nihilists, and we pronounce it here, we say as nihilist or nihilism, or in Arabic we say al-adamiyya, al-adam, nothingness, or absolute voidness or emptiness, or as I said, nothingness, or meaninglessness, to go back to the question of, or to connect to the question of existentialism, because existentialists, they say that this world is meaningless. There's nothing. You know, the whole idea of this is nothingness and meaninglessness and sameness and all this ness. Okay? So really the idea here is, again, it is important to see about these crazy ideas about exercised in this novel by people like Lebeziatnikov and Luzhin, the two other characters whom we hate in the novel. Lebeziatnikov and Luzhin, later on, both of them are ugly characters in the novel. As opposite examples of Raskolnikov, we shall see them. We shall see them in details. Lebeziatnikov and Luzhin. Luzhin, later on, of course, supposedly to be married or engaged to Raskolnikov's sister, Dunya, and we hate him because of his, you know, attitudes. Later on, we shall see why we hate him. And funny here to talk about the question of nihilism, you know, again, as another strong philosophy related to existentialism in so many ways. And so on. Really, I want you to read this. Again, I say here, the question of, I say Russian, Dostoevsky, you know, suffered from, again, a lot of, I think, elements to do with poverty, epilepsy, and addiction, and even gambling. You know, as he said, addiction to gambling or to drink. Again, as you can see, in 1866, the book was published, of course. Along here, a delirious trip through the psyche of a tormented murderer, his fortunes improved. You know, this is again the question of deliria. As I told you here, the whole idea that the novel here is, I think I mentioned the word deliria. The word deliria and delirium and delirious and hypochondria. Again, I think, you know, all this, again, related to the question of, you know, the crazy element of hallucination or schizophrenia. You know, all these things are amazingly important in the novel. When we read the novel, we shall find that very clear, I think, everywhere. Okay, now here I can read, maybe I'll read with you today just one paragraph. Yeah?
There is connection between his life and the novel. I read about that his financial situation was bad. Like when he was started to write this novel, his financial situation was bad. That's why he wrote about this this boy. His intention to kill this old rich woman to get her money.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Writers, you know, writers at the end of the day, you know, they were, I mean, to be honest, he, like so many other writers, write for money because they live on writing because they have nothing else to do. So really, yeah, there are reasons behind that to some extent. He himself suffered from poverty and all this. Again, why do you think he was a revolutionary radical leftist? Because he himself, like so many other people in society, the majority of society, the majority of people were absolutely poor people, miserably poor people. Yeah, of course. And his reaction was against the rich. But you see, this rich lady, we don't know. You know, she is not, maybe she's not a criminal. She didn't do maybe something bad, except maybe she was taking usury money, right? But I mean, this is today. If you borrow any money from any bank, they will take interests from you. You know, they say to you, "We don't take interest," but they are liars. All banks in the world, you know, they take money. They take your money. Of course. Try to borrow any money from any place. They will get interests on your. They will not give you money for no interests. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah,
true.
absolutely. So this old lady was doing something like a bank. She was pawning money or pawning trinkets or some kind of funny things. And you know, you give her the watch and she will give you 2 rubles. And the next day you bring her back the money, she will take interests. She will take maybe a penny or 2 pennies interest, like a bank. Really, it's like a bank. الربا وما أدراك ما الربا, isn't it? Huh? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is true that Russian society at that time, and like any society, it's not just Russian society, all Western society, many other societies. I mean, this is man. Come on, this is man. We men, we people are like that. We have there's no way we can run away from this. You know, Allah yarhamak ya Ibn Rushd. You know, Ibn Rushd, who talked about us and about society even before, you know, I told you about psychology. Go back to Ibn Rushd and see what he said about psychology and the way people behave and act and so on. So really, this is absolutely true that Dostoevsky absolutely had real problems, psychological, money, social, even physical, even mental. Even he, as I said, he was a gambler. He was a drunkard. Sometimes he was a drunkard, and so many things in real life. So yeah, of course, he wrote this part of his own maybe real experience. I think in so many ways. Maybe you don't want me to start reading the so I'm not going to next time here, and I will